Welcome to the Vanessa G Fitcast. If you think eating less is the answer to getting lean, or that you have to choose between having donuts and wine or having a body you love, well then girl, you are in the right place. Chances are you've fallen victim to diet culture's terrible advice on how to eat and exercise. But don't worry, this podcast is going to bring you actionable information so you can start transforming your body without giving up your life. I'm Vanessa Gillette, founder and head coach of Vanessa G Fitness and Nutrition. This podcast was born from my passion for helping all women create bodies they feel confident in. Thank you for tuning in and trusting me to support and guide you. Now let's do this. Welcome back to the Vanessa G Fitcast. I'm Vanessa Pozos, and here with me is Omar Pozos, my co-host, husband, and evacuation
fellow
buddy.
hurricane evacuee.
We are actually recording this episode live from the Cabana Bay Resort Universal Studios Orlando, where we are both sitting in our beds. Painting the whole picture for you, we're sitting in our beds in the hotel room. It is currently very rainy and gross outside the window because we are preparing for Hurricane Milton. Is as of right now, we're recording this episode about midday Wednesday, and it is set to be making landfall in the Tampa Bay area, which is where we live, overnight tonight. So that's why we actually evacuated over to Orlando, which, man, it's been a hectic couple of days.
Yeah, it's been a whirlwind, I think. But where do you want to start? Do you want to maybe recap what the last 3-4 days have been looking like for us?
Yeah.
And go from there? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, let's do it. Because, I think for those who maybe are even unfamiliar with hurricane life, the reality is you have days to prepare for something like this, but it also it's the same time feels so just out of the blue, because I was thinking about on Friday how I had my plans for next week if I was going to get all this work done and had all these different things. I was excited going the weekend, and then we wake up Saturday morning, we're like, oh, there's a hurricane forming in the Gulf. As of right now, it's projected to come right at us where we live in Tampa Bay in the St. Pete area. And so Saturday, we're all kind of watching it, starting to do little things. Sunday morning, we're like, oh yeah, no, this is a real big thing that's forming. Projections are not good. So Sunday morning is when we all started. I say we all, my family specifically. I have my entire, I'm originally from Tampa Bay, so pretty much my entire family lives in the Tampa Bay area. So we all were kind of talking about boarding up our houses, putting up shutters, all the different things. And so Omar and I started putting up our shutters on Sunday morning, which our shutters are not even really shutters. It's hurricane cloth.
They're hurricane proof, but yeah, they're not the most resistant to things.
It's basically, it doesn't actually protect your glass from breaking. It just protects with the air pressure.
The wind, yeah.
But our house is also on higher ground, so we're not expecting even worst case scenario. We really shouldn't get flooded in the house. It's more of the high force hurricane winds that is the concern. So ultimately, with our family, come Sunday night, we all decided, let's sit down, figure out what we need to do here. We had spent all day Sunday starting to put together evacuation plans / starting to prepare our houses, kind of talking what should we do, what should we not do, kind of monitoring the status of this hurricane forming. And so with that, obviously, you can imagine it's a little bit stressful kind of being in that situation, figuring out plans, kind of organizing your life. For people like us, we're business owners. We have an online business that is going to continue to run whether we're evacuating or not. So trying to get things organized, make plans, going between all the houses within my family to help each other kind of get things put up, cleaned up, boarded, all the things. And where things are a little bit more difficult for my family is we actually have a lot of animals. So my parents, part of their kind of businesses is they work in education, and we're big into animal science programs as well. And so within my family, we have stables full of horses. We have
Give us the rundown of the animals that you guys had to evacuate.
Yeah, so what we ended up evacuating, we evacuated 7 horses, because not all the horses actually at the stables belong to us. We have people who board their horses there, and some of them chose to actually just move their horses over to another nearby barn and keep them there. And that is their choice, whatever they want to do. We offered the ability to evacuate horses, but we ended up having 7 that we evacuated, 3 of them that we owned and the other 4 that were owned by others. Then we had a lot of goats. So we have 6 goats right now. One of them even being pregnant. So a lot of goats. We have a alpaca, a miniature horse, a donkey, and yeah, that's all that we were evacuating essentially. And so with those plans, like with having horses and animals, it's not as simple for us to just be like, okay, you know what? Let's go ahead and evacuate. Let's just pick up our stuff and leave. Like we have to figure out what to do with the animals. And growing up, I mean, gosh, Tampa Bay actually, even again for those who are not familiar with hurricanes or not in Florida, um, hurricanes. You have hurricane season every single year, so it's something you're always kind of like thinking about and preparing
You're
for.
you're prone to storms every single
Yeah,
year.
but the Tampa Bay area, even specifically, has not had a direct hit from a hurricane in over 100 years.
1921, I think
I
I
was the
saw.
last
Yep.
one. Yeah. We've always been weirdly lucky, and what us local Tampa Bay people always attribute it to is that there actually are burial grounds from the Seminole Indian Native American tribes throughout Pinellas County. And it's like said that they have blessed the burial grounds. And that's why we are protected from hurricanes. So, like, don't get me wrong, we've had plenty of tropical storms. We've had, we've always had like outer bands of hurricanes. Like, for example, Hurricane Helene recently came through, did a lot of damage in the Tampa Bay area, but that was not because of the hurricane directly hitting us. That's from storm surge, which is when the hurricane essentially pushes the water from the Gulf inland. And so, I mean, gosh, that's a whole nother story of the fact that our Tampa Bay area is already really struggling with the amount of homes, businesses, cars, all the things that were destroyed and lost from Hurricane Helene 2 weeks ago. So, not the best situation for um, us Tampa Bay people, but back to kind of what we were saying. So trying to figure out, okay, what do we do with animals here? So that's where Sunday night we had just spent most of the afternoon finishing up at my parents' house, which is like the oldest house between our families. And I definitely don't have any kind of like hurricane force windows or anything like that. So it's not the best house for a hurricane to come directly through. So
Especially the size that this one is coming into, being like a
mhm.
category 4, category 5. Those are very scary
Yeah, as of right
situations.
now, it's projected to make landfall as a Category 4, which is a major hurricane. That's a monster of a hurricane, and, my family's home, like I said, is older, so then you guys, all the guys were out there for hours just putting up plywood over the windows, and so then after you guys kind of wrapped up with what you could do, at least we sat down for dinner and we basically all just like talked it out of should we evacuate, should we not? Especially like us women. I think like my sister has 3 young kids, one being a baby. So like you can imagine, especially she was like before this was even projected to be moving into a category 4 or 5, when it was more so like, oh, thinking maybe category 2, 3, she was really pushing like we need to evacuate just to be safe, just to make sure that with the kids nobody has to like sit in fear of what happens if the roof goes flying off and you have
Yeah.
kids in the house. I was on board with her. My mom was on board with her. Um, of course, some of the guys I feel like a little bit more like, oh, I don't know, let's wait and see, let's get more information. But the reason we were pushing more of like we need to make this decision now, this was come Sunday night, was because the hurricane was at that point was projected to make landfall. What would have been now is the time of recording, which was midday Wednesday. And the thing is, when you are thinking about evacuating, you have to evacuate well in advance because of everybody is evacuating, which means huge traffic jams. So we all decided to kind of basically, all right, let's do it. We're going to evacuate, but now we had to figure out where to evacuate to. And that was the other stressful situation is, again, Hurricane Helene just came through the west coast of Florida, kind of taking out a lot of people's homes, which means that a lot of Floridians are already displaced, which means that a lot of Florida hotels are already hosting a lot of people. So now add in a lot of evacuations from this hurricane. And come Monday morning, or no, I think it was midday Monday, talking to some people, nobody could find any hotels left in
Mhm.
Florida at that point in time. So thankfully, that was Sunday night that we made the decision we're gonna get out of here, trying to find hotels. We were looking at like Gainesville. Nope, no hotels available in Gainesville. Ocala, no hotels available in Ocala. Um,
Jacksonville, I think we looked at Jacksonville too
yeah, I
for a
think
little
there
bit,
was
right?
maybe a little bit of availability, but we also there were concerns because we know some people in Jacksonville that still didn't have power from the other hurricane, and there was also talks of Jacksonville possibly flooding once this hurricane Milton reaches the other side. So there's a lot of factors to consider. Ultimately, we landed on let's just go to Orlando. It is in the path of the storm because the hurricane is supposed to cross straight over Florida, which means it's going to move from Tampa Bay over Orlando to the other coast, to the east coast of Florida. But as it crosses over the state, it will weaken. And these big kind of Orlando resort hotels are really, they're like fortresses. They are built for this stuff. So it's much safer to be at one of these kinds of hotels than it would be to just stay at our home on the coast there. So we found a resort hotel, booked a bunch of rooms for basically our whole family, and that was all set to go come Sunday night. So then again, we were figuring out making final plans. What are we doing with the animals? Thankfully, so my sister and I, who grew up showing horses our whole life, our horse trainers, they live in North Florida and they have a big, beautiful farm. And so they are incredible. So shout out to Pine Tree Quarter Horses and the Augsburger family. They're incredible. They volunteered to send down two big trailers to pick up all of our horses, so that then we could take our trailer, we have more of like a hybrid kind of horse trailer, livestock trailer. And so we actually were able to just use that for all the little farm animals. And so essentially they then drove down, which is a 3-hour drive. They drove down 3 hours come Monday morning. So we met them lunchtime, loaded up all the horses and the animals. And then with that, we had like a caravan of 3 trailers. So my mom and I pulled our trailer following our horse trainers with the 2 trailers of the horses. And we headed north to their farm, which should have been a 3-hour drive north.
Should have been a 3-hour drive north. It's that's I'm looking at your face right now because Vanessa was. I mean, I'll let you tell the story, but how long did it end up being?
Well, we left at 2:20 p.m. on Monday, headed north. It took an hour 20 just to get out of our immediate town, which should have been like 20 minutes. That took an hour 20. That's just to give you kind of a glimpse into when we were realizing, oh crap, this is going to be a longer drive than expected.
Hmm.
So finally, we had it mapped the whole time, so we kept watching the like projected time of arrival. And originally, I think when we first took off, it was showing like 6 o'clock. So it was going to show like maybe an extra hour as opposed to what it would normally be without traffic. We're like, oh, that's not a problem. That'll be fine. Get there around 6. Our plan was, drop the animals there, then turn around and head back south to Orlando and meet you guys here at the hotel. And we figured we'd probably even get here before you guys would.
Hmm.
Well, come 6 o'clock, we made a stop to get fuel, and we were like barely out of Tampa Bay at that point. The traffic, you guys, was like nothing I've ever seen before. This is with them even opening the emergency lanes up for use to help with all the traffic flow. It was still, we averaged about 5 to 8 miles per hour the entire way. It took us, we pulled into their farm at about 2:18 a.m. in the
So
morning.
was that 12 hours roughly?
No, sorry, not 2:18. It was 1:18 because then we got back on the road closer to 2. So it was almost 12 hours that we were on the road. Factor in we did stop twice because the first one we had to they thankfully Andrew, my horse trainer, was like, okay, time to stop for fuel. Thank God, because my mom and I were like, really, really need to pee. And it had been 5 hours at the point. We were not prepared to be in the car for that long, in the truck for that long. So we ran and peed, of course, at that point, mapped it. It showed, 2 more hours to get there when I was
Hmm.
mapping it. So I was like, okay, we only have 2 more hours. At that point, I'd been like purposely dehydrating myself, knowing that my trainer does not like to stop unless we absolutely have to, which is understandable because when you have these big rigs, it's hard to get in and out of um, those
Gas
like truck
stations and
stop
stuff.
gas stations. And so at that point, I was like, okay, it's only 2 more hours from here. I'm going to get a big bottle of water and finally kind of start to rehydrate myself because now I know I can just make it this last 2 hours until the farm and I'll be able to pee when I get to the farm. Well, 2 hours passes. I'm like, I feel like we've gotten nowhere. I map it again. It now says 2.5 hours to get there. I'm like, 2 hours ago, it said we'd be there in 2 hours. And now it says 2 hours and 30 something minutes to get there. And that became the theme of the night. It was like every time I check my phone, like every
Oh.
hour, it'd be like 2 hours and something minutes remaining. Like it felt like we were in this time warp where it made no sense. And so that's where we ended up stopping a second time because I like begged him. I was like, I really need to pee. Can we please pull over? So we ended up stopping a second time as well. I wanted to give the full rundown of kind of how all that went, but the main point of this episode is I want to share with you guys the real life, like the nitty gritty of how, when you are somebody who is more invested in your health and fitness, how do you manage when all the unexpected things happen, when you are in these worst case scenarios, when your health, your nutrition, your fitness goals is the lowest priority on your list at that point in time, what do you do? What does that actually look like? How do you actually manage these types of things? And so I want to give you guys kind of that raw inside look with this episode here. So, going back to Sunday when we were kind of starting to make plans, we were boarding up the houses, all the different things. At that point in time, starting to feel like the feelings, a little bit of stress and anxiety. And at that point, I would say stress didn't even really feel like stress in the sense of like, oh my God, I'm so anxious and scared and afraid. It felt more almost like adrenaline. Like I kind of felt just very like just
Like
wanting to do
very
all
like
the
fight or
things.
flight kind of
Yeah,
thing.
kind of more in the flight type of mode. But like I didn't feel like bad necessarily. I just felt like kind of focused, I guess is how I describe it.
Hmm.
But with that, when I personally am in that kind of state, at least during the day, and like I think people when they're in this scenario in work can resonate with this because I get this way with work too. If I'm in this place where I'm just in that like super dialed in focus, like have a lot of things to do and kind of stress type of mode, I don't really notice hunger signals or hunger cues when I'm like that. I feel like I have not really much of an appetite. Typically, it just like I have no appetite all day long. I could easily go all day long without eating. And then more so in the evenings, once I kind of like slow down and settle down, that's when like the hunger hits me. And that's when I'm suddenly like, I will just eat all the things. And I
Yeah.
feel suddenly like I don't have any fullness cues. So kind of like flip flops. So, knowing that about myself and knowing that that is a fairly normal tendency for humans and kind of what happens when you're having a stress response, when you're having these hormones associated with stress being produced with cortisol and epinephrine, well, essentially, of course, your body is not really thinking about, oh, let's sit down and let's get into rest and digest mode and like digest food. Your body is thinking we need to prepare for whatever this threat is that the brain is currently concerned about and consumed by. So the body is like tapping into stored glucose, which is what is going to be stored in the muscle, and it actually would start to kind of break down your this is when your blood sugars start to get a little bit higher. Like if you're testing your blood sugars, you would see that your blood sugar is actually higher, even though you probably aren't eating.
Well, that happened to me. Remember, I'm also testing my blood sugars just for my own well-being and some stuff that I'm working through. But last week was a very, very stressful week for us, and like throughout all day long, because I was checking them like 5 times a day. Whether it was after a meal, not meal, anything like that. Like my blood sugars just were skyrocketed to the point where like my coach was like, "Is everything okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, just the stressful situation, stressful week." But
Yeah, absolutely. Your body is mobilizing stored glucose for fuel and for energy. And that's why you're
hmm
not necessarily feeling hungry, yet you're having higher blood sugars because that's what your body's kind of running off of. That's not like that is a healthy thing in short bursts. Like that's what you would want to happen if you're doing a hard workout. You want your body to be able to release that stored glucose and allow you to burn that as fuel to engage in the workout. And then theoretically, after the workout, you calm your nervous system back down, you shift back more into a parasympathetic kind of restful state. And that's when your body stops burning the glucose. And then you would have a meal, and your body then can like start to actually utilize fuel more efficiently. If, on the other hand, in these types of situations where we're not in a workout, we're not shifting between these more intentional nervous system states, we're just kind of like stuck in that sympathetic fight or flight dominant nervous system state all day because we are having these like psychological stressors coming about. We're just going to be burning this glucose all day long. This is when you might hear kind of like the references around being like a sugar burning state. You're just kind of like burning sugar all day long, and what's actually happening, your body is pulling that sugar from the stores in your liver and in your muscles. And that's where we can start to break down muscle, and you can actually lose muscle and store body fat over the course of time because that body fat storage will start to come as you start to build some insulin resistance from having your blood sugar so high. All of that context to say this is why on a day like Sunday, where I was noticing, okay, I don't feel hungry right now. I'm very inclined to just not eat meals. That's when I have to step in and mentally, logically put in kind of the overdrive of no, even though I'm feeling that physically, and even though normally it is important to factor in and consider and listen to your body's hunger and fullness cues, I have to use logic here to make the decision that I need to feed myself anyway. And I need to even set timers on my phone to make sure I am continuing to feed myself every few hours and have balanced meals every 2 to 4 hours to make sure that my body is able to kind of regulate my blood sugar, is able to regulate my cortisol because actually consuming a healthy balanced meal will help bring cortisol down. and be able to just make that decision. And that's where I was able to do that. So that was Sunday, and I was much better, much more intentional about that on Sunday, kind of knowing what was happening. I even stepped away while you were putting up our little hurricane cloth is what it's called.
They're
Um,
shutters. They're shutters. They're gonna be okay, I think.
yeah, well, he was putting up the hurricane shutters. I helped initially, but then I was like, okay, peace. See ya. I'm actually going to walk over to the yoga studio right by our house and get in a yoga class. And initially, I was kind of in this place of like, I should just cancel this because I had already booked the class like 2 days before or something. And I was like, oh, I should cancel it. There's so many things to do. And that's where I was like, you know what? Yes, I could cancel it and, get this hour and a half back to do other things to help prepare. Or I can step away for this hour and a half, go to this yoga class, which I'm not doing like hot yoga or intense yoga or anything like that. I'm doing yoga for the purposes of helping my body um, actually bring stress down and really kind of tune into my body um, without like having a ton of high exertion, high heart rate, anything like that. And so glad I made that decision because I felt so calm and relaxed in and coming out of the yoga class. I really think that helped me through the rest of that day. Well, Monday, like we said, things did not quite go as planned. So Monday, I honestly, same thing. I was like, woke up Monday morning, had zero inclination to want to eat breakfast. And so that's where I was like, I have to eat breakfast. You actually were the one that were like, I was like frantically running around trying to pack up so I could head out to the barn and help start loading up animals. And Omar was like, "Oh, you want me to make you some food?" And
Yeah.
so,
Honestly, for me, sometimes I think it happens, the opposite effect happens where I almost start to like stress eat because I'm like, I know I'm not going to be able to eat. So I need to eat now.
yeah,
And then
that's a
later on
normal
comes
response
around,
too.
and I see it the opposite where I'm like, dang, I'm like, I just ate this and now I'm eating this and I got to stop at the gas station and eat that. But yeah, I mean, on Monday, like you were traveling, and for a little bit of context, so Vanessa basically went with her mom to drop off the animals. I stayed behind, made sure the house was taken care of, and then our dog Zoe and I drove up from Orlando. I didn't.
Drove up to Orlando.
What did I
You
say?
said drove up from Orlando.
Sorry, drove up to Orlando from Tampa Bay. And I didn't have it nearly as bad as Vanessa because normally it's about an hour 45, 2 hour drive
Mhm.
from Tampa to Orlando. And I made it in about five. I mean, not terrible, not great. But yeah, at that point, I mean, it was just her, Zoe and I. And so I picked up some beef jerky and I picked up a protein bar. And that was like really my dinner because there was not much else. And then, when we got to the hotel, we kind of navigated a little bit better then. To me, it's a little bit of the opposite effect to where I think you, Vanessa, were like, hey, I'm so focused on the things I need to do where I just don't eat, period.
You were like, "I wanna eat all the snacks right now."
Yeah, I'm like, I'm not going to be able to eat them. So I need to eat them now.
Yeah, I had the balanced meal come Monday morning. We even like, so we had to go drop our second vehicle right now is a golf cart. So we had to go drop our golf cart into one of the parking garages that they opened up
Gosh, I forgot
in
that we did all that. Like, it
there
feels
was a
like forever
lot
ago.
that happened over the last 36 hours. So we did that early Monday morning, and so coming back from that, we stopped at a coffee shop, and I made sure, like, on that there's times I love a good sweet coffee, but I'm also intentional about, like, how I make choices when it comes to coffee, and so, like, on that morning, knowing that I wasn't very hungry and knowing I probably would have trouble kind of even finishing my meal, I went ahead and ordered a oat milk latte with a little bit of maple syrup in it just because intentionally I'm like, I do need to get a little bit of extra carbs in here. And this is a way to do that. So I had that along with my breakfast of had some eggs, some ground beef, some peppers, some bell peppers mixed into that, and then some fruit on the side. And so that with my coffee, I had trouble getting it down. It took me a little while. I had to kind of keep coming back to it, which is totally fine. And that's a takeaway that people can have as well. If you can't finish your meal in the sitting, like you can continue to kind of pick at it. That's
Hmm.
okay. But if you know, like logically, I know I need this food, and this is where kind of spending time tracking and learning about macros, learning about calories, learning about your body's needs is
Honestly, even just
important.
learning what a balanced meal looks like, I think is
Yeah,
so important.
exactly, and that's where this stuff becomes so helpful. This is the education and the knowledge that equips you in these kinds of moments so that I can logically say, I don't want my cortisol to continue to rise because I'm not giving my body food right now. And then with my cortisol rising, cause that to create more stress and anxiety feelings within me, kind of mentally and physically, and have this like cascade of anxiety. I want to make sure I can manage my just mental health as best as possible in times like this. And feeding myself appropriately and smartly is a very great way to do that.
Yeah. And here's the other perspective, right? So, in hopefully it's not a hurricane situation, but I'm sure our listeners go through the busy seasons at work, the busy seasons in life, a vacation, so and so's birthday. But the reality of it is, life is going to throw you curveballs and you just kind of have to roll with the punches. So in this case, if you think of it from the perspective of like, I'm just going to wing it and see what happens, you're already in a stressful situation, which you can't control at all. Like in our situation, we've left the house, we've left our home, our belongings, and that's also very stressful. And then on top of that, if you're not taking care of yourself, you're going to feel even crappier and crappier to the point where, like, not only is the situation really terrible, but then you feel terrible, which then just adds to the mix as opposed to what you were doing. But
Hmm.
I'm going to ask you a little bit because I'm going to put you on the spot. But can you share, like, because you posted such a great story on, I think it was Sunday or Monday, I forget, where I think a lot of people resonate with that of like what you did prioritize versus what you didn't do, just to give the listeners of like a little bit more of that insight as to kind of how you navigated that stuff?
Yeah, well, when I know that I am stressed like that, I'm not going to be focusing on training hard. I don't want to be doing these hard workouts where I'm raising my heart rate high and again, kind of creating a little bit of this cortisol response that I know my body is not really equipped to handle during these types of times. I'm not going to be stressing about my nutrition in a perfect sense of like trying to be absolutely perfect with things. And I'm definitely not going to be putting myself into any kind of calorie deficit. So, like, if I were currently in a calorie deficit trying to lose body fat, I would not be staying in the calorie deficit during this time. I would be pulling my calories back up to more of like a maintenance calorie range. And that's what I did. So I focused on eating around 2,000 calories, which currently was just kind of more within a little bit lower on my maintenance range, but knowing my activity levels were also a little bit low. I mean, I was in the car all day long on Monday. I was kind of just aiming to eat around 2,000 calories, a little bit higher than that if I could. And I was focused on just getting in gentle movement and focusing on overall kind of stress and nervous system management. So like prior to the hurricane, we went to the sauna and cold plunge on Saturday, which is really really great for our bodies to kind of shift our nervous systems into that parasympathetic state. It's really really great for nervous system support. As women, you do need to be a little bit careful with the cold plunge of not overdoing it. There is some newer research showing that a little bit higher temps in the cold plunge, going more towards like the higher 40s, early 50s on the degrees, as opposed to like the high 30s, early 40s, could be more beneficial for women. So just keeping that in mind and kind of being mindful and kind of figuring out how your body specifically responds to these types of tools, because that's what they are. But ultimately, you have to just really, I think a big part of this is the psychological aspect of focusing on the controllables, having a plan, having like a plan A, but also knowing that like oftentimes in these types of situations, your plan is not going to always go as planned. And you have to be flexible. You have to be able to kind of just move with the things and go with the flow and give yourself grace and permission. On Monday, I had to give myself a lot of grace because like I said, Monday morning started off well. Omar made my breakfast. I made sure I finished that. I was feeling good about, okay, even though I was not feeling hungry, I got my meal in, feeling full, feeling satisfied. We had already meal prepped on Saturday morning before we knew the extent of the hurricane, and we were like, oh, we'll be fine. We'll just prep our food for the week. So we had food meal prepped in the fridge, and so originally I was like, I had my plan of I'm going to pack my lunch to go with me for us in the car driving up with the animals on Monday, and then it shouldn't be that far of a drive. We'll get to Orlando around dinner time. I'll have dinner at the hotel, or I'll figure out picking something up around the hotel. So that was kind of my plan. Well, again, being in that state, I wasn't thinking things all the way through. I completely forgot to actually pack the food with me to go to the barn. So I did not pack a lunch. So once I went over to my mom's house, I just took some of the snacks from her pantry because she has a lot of great nutrient dense foods because she's very mindful of her health as well. And so I packed like a little cup of yogurt. I packed a container of berries, and I packed a little baggie of a serving size of granola. And I was like, oh, this will be fine. We're going to stop at a gas station, I'm sure, at some point anyway. I can always grab something on the road there, but this will be like a light little mini meal essentially for me to have as like a lunch replacement. Well, then, we get on the road, and I was the one driving the truck. So I was like, it's hard to eat this yogurt right now. I'll get to it later. Well, by the time I went to like actually, once my mom and I switched, I opened up the little cooler she packed, and like she had packed one of those little freezer um,
Like the
ice
gel
packs, like
packs?
yeah, exactly, the jelly ice packs, and it had like exploded
Oh,
all
no.
over, and it was just really gross. And I was like, I don't want this yogurt right now. So I think I just ate the fruit and the granola, and then when we stopped at the gas station, I grabbed a protein bar, I grabbed just like a Bear Bells protein bar. And so I ate that. Well, then again, we were in the car forever. So at this point, I had been just sitting pretty much all day long. It felt like I had not hardly gotten any movement. I didn't even look at what my step count was for the day because it was pointless. I knew I wasn't going to hit my steps, but I was probably ended up around 3 or 4,000 steps. Um, and I ultimately, like, when we did finally leave the I should throw in there, I had, like, some my mom had some different, like, nut mixes, so I snacked on that a little bit. So, like, calorically, I did okay in that meal. Definitely was not getting enough overall, but I had to give myself grace here. My plan originally, when I thought we'd be getting in at a decent hour, was still that once we drop the animals, because we'll drop the animals, we'll drop the trailer, and we'll just be in the truck. At that point, her and I will have the flexibility and availability to stop anywhere for food. Well, with it being after 1 a.m., knowing we still had a couple hours to drive to Orlando, so we were only going to get, a few hours of sleep, I had to keep my circadian rhythm management in mind. And meals and food is a big factor in managing your circadian rhythm and managing your body's ability to know what time of day it is. So if I were to suddenly eat a big meal at 1:32 in the morning, that would really just throw off my circadian rhythm and not set me well up for the following day. So I actually made the decision to just not eat anymore at that point and just focus on getting to Orlando, getting to bed, sleeping for a few hours, and then starting the next day, Tuesday, on a fresh foot of eating a normal breakfast at a normal time.
Hmm.
And that's what we ultimately did. We got to the hotel. What time did I call you? Like 3
3:30, I
3:30.
think. Yeah.
Called him at 3:30, so he came down to help us with the bags. What a saint. What a good man.
3:30 in the morning, by the
Yes. Yeah.
way. Might I add.
And then we came up and I slept for, according to my Aura ring, I took a 2 hour and 45-minute nap. That was my sleep that night. And then I got up with you at like 7:30 or so and, walked Zoe and we got some food and kind of went
Started
from
our
there.
Monday basically. Another question that I wanted to ask Ness that I think is going to bring a lot of insight and help to followers or to our listeners is, you mentioned like controlling the controllables, but obviously in a situation like this where point A or plan A doesn't work, plan B kind of goes to crap. You guys were stuck in traffic, got to the hotel at 3:30. Can you share about, and even like looking at the stuff we have in the hotel room now, like what are some of the things that you've done that we've done, and I can throw in some of the ideas that come to mind too, just to make sure that we are, for the most part, staying well fed, staying, again, prioritizing nutrient dense foods as opposed to going out to the lobby eating like, French fries and like McDonald's every single day.
Yeah, because like this hotel has some built-in restaurants that are kind of like diner style. So like they have options, but not the most ideal options for our situation. So with us wanting to control, we can control. Like I said, that Tuesday morning, once I got up at kind of a normal hour, I was like, okay, I need to get back on track with normal meals. You and I went to the grocery store and we got some hard-boiled eggs. We got some yogurts.
I'm gonna
We
open up the fridge to see what else I see in here. You can go. You keep going.
So we got some hard-boiled eggs, some yogurts, we got fruit, and essentially for breakfast, I had a few hard-boiled eggs, a cup of yogurt, and some fruit with it, and that was kind of my getting some whole food, protein, fat, and carbs and fiber in. And then for lunch, I grabbed my mom and my little niece because with having like little kids around, we were trying to get them out and about as much as possible. So the group of us, along with our dog, trying to also get her out as much as possible. We actually drove over to there's a meal prep place that's local, and so we drove over there and we just got a bunch of meals for our family, and that's what we had for lunch. So we were able to kind of get some nutrient dense meals for our lunches. And then for dinner, we went over to Disney Springs. This is the fun part of at least being in Orlando with the family is trying to make the most of it, do what we can. And so we went over to Disney Springs and we ate dinner at a restaurant there. But what else am I missing? What else do we
No,
have?
nothing. I think the fit life stuff was really great. Because again, we could have, gone downstairs, had the fried food, had all these things. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. But my point being is there's also other very easy, very accessible options like a fit life where you have very custom or very well balanced meals. They've got the ingredients on there. And again, same thing. You just throw them in the microwave. You're still, fueling yourself
Mhm.
correctly. We picked up a couple core powers, which are great, 25 or 26 grams of protein in each one. But yeah, oh, the immunity shots that we always like to get, just to make sure that again, immunity, everything as
Yeah,
well.
because you kind of weren't feeling well, so
Hmm.
that was a
Yeah.
big one too.
But that was really it. Yeah. I think that just the fit life stuff where like it doesn't matter where you go. Like, I'm sure there's always a meal prep company or anything along those lines, or you can even buy like, we always are big fans of going to like grocery stores and getting like bulk proteins, bulk veggies, and just
Mhm.
creating your own meals.
And,
But
like,
little
deli
stuff
meat,
like
stuff
that
like that.
that
But
doesn't require a kitchen, and you can still eat a great meal.
as long as you have a mini fridge or even just a cooler and some ice from the hotel, these are great options to have on
Hmm.
hand. We also brought, protein powder, things like that to easily kind of supplement what we have.
Yep.
And lots of bottles of water, electrolytes, all the things to really keep ourselves, especially with, like I was saying, that kind of a breakfast of just yogurt, fruit, hard boiled eggs. I know I'm not getting enough electrolytes from that because normally I would have like eggs that I'm cooking and intentionally adding quality sea salt onto. So it's important that I make sure I drink some added electrolytes to aid my body with overall hydration. So that's really the bulk of kind of what we've done up until now. And today is Wednesday, and I'm feeling a whole lot better today than I felt yesterday. I felt kind of dead yesterday from that overnight drive, and now we're just kind of hunkering down, hoping that the hurricane, you know, fingers crossed that it does maybe die down before it lands. As of right
Let's
now, it's
pray to the
projected to
burial grounds that they have
yeah, it's
that it's
projected to
not
be
too
a
bad.
Cat 4 landing overnight, and it's still unsure of exactly where it's going to land, of if the eye will hit kind of right where we are in St. Pete, or the latest model showed the eye possibly hitting like just south of that, more Sarasota. So really, really praying for anybody living in that area as well. And so we'll kind of see what ends up happening here. If you're listening to this, you probably already know. So hopefully just looking into the future, hopefully all went well.
By
We're back
Monday,
home.
yeah.
We're safe and sound. Everybody is safe and the damage is contained and minimal. And we can all focus on just kind of getting back to the norms.
Yeah, absolutely. But that's really it, right? Anything else you want to throw in there? Anything else you want to add?
No, I think that's it. Thank you guys so much for listening to our Hurricane Hotel episode here. But we'll be back next week with another great episode.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks for listening. If you learned something today, the best way to say thank you is to subscribe to the podcast and leave a 5-star review in iTunes. And if this particular episode resonated with you, do me a favor and take a screenshot and share it on your Instagram story. Don't forget to tag me at Vanessa G Fitness so I can show you some love. All right, my carb queens, talk to you in the next episode.